Ken Isserlis is there. He's on the screen. You can see him. And Yvonne Swan is here. The recent newsletter had an interview with Ken about the importance of Yvonne's victory in Olympia. And I tried the best I could to summarize Yvonne's situation in a short number of pages and just was fascinated by it. So really honored to have you. How do you do it, Ken? You're in charge.
I'm going to start, and then we'll spend most of our time listening to Yvonne.
Okay.
Let me
I hear
first,
you well.
thank you. And hopefully, Yvonne, you can hear me, and it'll be your turn in just a moment. First, thanks to Linda and Nick for setting this up, and particularly thanks to Taylor for helping us older people with the technology. That was a challenge for a while there. This is a Spokane story. It's Yvonne's story. And again, you'll mostly hear from her. I just want to lay out a little bit of the chronology so it makes sense to get started. In the legal world, Yvonne's case is best known for the whole notion of, or the whole area of self-defense in a criminal case. And the change, the Washington Supreme Court's case in Olympia changed the standard for self-defense as a result of Yvonne's case. The standard had been, how much force does a so-called reasonable or typical man have to use in a particular situation to protect himself? That was the case, that was the standard that was used in Yvonne's trial before she went to the Supreme Court. The change was a personal standard. That is, how much force does this person, a 5'4" woman, Yvonne Wanrow at the time, have to use to protect herself and her children in this situation, facing a drunken, out of control, 6'2" known child molester. And that change to this day remains significant for women facing domestic violence and others who are legitimately arguing self-defense in a criminal case no longer have to deal with the fact that what might be reasonable for a typical man wasn't reasonable for them. The legal part of Yvonne's case had 4 stops in 3 different courts in the state of Washington. It started in August of 1972 in Spokane with a shooting. At this incident, this confrontation, Yvonne shot and wounded one person, shot and killed another. From August of 1972, we go to May of 1973, the trial court, first step in this process, the Spokane County Superior Court, where Yvonne was convicted of second-degree murder and first-degree assault. From the trial court, you appeal to the Washington Court of Appeals, which also is in Spokane. And at that court, in August of 1975, she won. Not on the self-defense issue, which the case became known for, but on a more technical issue where the Court of Appeals ruled it was improper to let the jury hear the recording to the crime check or 911 call that Yvonne and her friend had made. So when you win an appeal, you're not done. You just get another trial, in this case, a second trial without the recording of that call. But instead of a second trial, the prosecution, the Spokane County prosecutor, appealed from the Court of Appeals to the Washington Supreme Court, which is where you go to appeal from the Court of Appeals. And the Supreme Court, in January of 1977, ruled in Yvonne's favor on the tape recording issue, but also on the self-defense issue, which became, again, the landmark part of this case. On an additional issue, the use of an Indian culture expert to explain to an all-white jury why Yvonne's Native American heritage was a factor here was not allowed. And that decision not to allow that expert held up in the Court of Appeals and in the Supreme Court. So again, she's won in the Supreme Court. That doesn't mean it's over. It means back finally to the Spokane County Superior Court. And by this time, it's January of 1977 when the Supreme Court ruled. It's back to the Superior Court. No Indian culture expert, but no recording of the call to crime check and self-defense rules having to do with Yvonne in particular. And there would have been a second trial, but in April of 1979, the case was resolved. Yvonne pled guilty to lesser charges, manslaughter rather than second-degree murder, second-degree assault, rather than first-degree assault. And with the agreement of the prosecution, there was a recommendation that she serve no jail time. The court accepted that recommendation, and on April 26, 1979, Yvonne's legal journey ended, although certainly her activism and significance continue to this day. That's all you're going to hear from me, fortunately for you. Yvonne's going to talk about her background, generally, how she came to be in Spokane in August of 1972, and her firsthand story of the shooting incident, which no matter how many times I hear it, is always compelling. Then she's going to talk about how she changed her plea. She was originally advised to plead guilty and decided to plead not guilty, and why she made that decision. Then she's going to talk about how the case became such a big deal. At the trial court level and in the Court of Appeals, she was represented by a Spokane lawyer, excellent lawyer, Gene Annis, a good guy and a good man who sadly died last year. But between the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, this got very big at all levels. And Yvonne was represented by different lawyers in the Supreme Court. And it became not just a case, but a cause. And she'll talk about how that change happened and finally talk about the outcome after the Supreme Court and the return to the trial court, the plea to the lesser charges, and the people who supported her in convincing the judge that her going to jail, as the judge said at the time, would serve no purpose whatsoever. And that wasn't even something he considered. So with that, I'll be quiet. Yvonne will talk, and we'll be sure to leave some time at the end for questions, and hopefully Taylor help us figure out how to take questions in this Star Trek format here. So Yvonne, if you're ready, you're up.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you in my language. Why is sipat in Chakanson Eichst? Lut American, Lut Canadian in Chakanson Eichst. Okay, I said, hello, my Indian name is Sipat, and I'm not Canadian, I'm not American. I am Arrow Lakes Indian. My mother's people, originally from Canada, British Columbia. So there's a history. Ken wanted me to give a background, so I'm going way back. So my people were kept, after the Canadian border was built, my people were kept from going north to their winter camps. And we were put together with the Colville Confederated Tribes here. So I went to school, and in the 60s, and vocational training in San Francisco. And I got my children after I got a job and got a babysitter and got my own apartment. And 3 weeks later, my little girl passed away suddenly. And so I left, brought her back to the Colville Reservation, and I tried to reconcile with her father, and that didn't work. For 2 years, it just didn't work. So I left with my children, my child, and I had another girl, my son and Yvette, Garen and Yvette, and I moved back to my home, my mother's home, and then I went to Spokane. I thought I'd either go to school or get a job. I was just totally lost. And I met this woman, Shirley Hooper, who became a babysitter. We became friends. I'd take her to the store or whatever. Her kids were my kids' age. And I fell and broke my leg and my ankle. And she really helped me with my kids. And one day I had to go to the doctor to check my leg, and he said that I could put pressure on my foot, my leg. And I got home, my car broke down, so I was home, and I called Shirley and told her. She said, that's okay, the kids can stay here. overnight. They're fine. They get along well with my girls. And so that was it. And suddenly she called me and she asked me if she could borrow my gun. She knew I had a gun because it broke and I had it fixed. And I asked her why, and she told me, well, there's a prowler in my neighborhood. A neighbor saw him one night in the bushes when she backed out after visiting with her. And then somebody slashed her bedroom screen. She had the landlord fix it. Somebody slashed it again. She had the landlord fix it. And I got in the cab and I went to her home, and the landlord was there, and he said, somebody loosened the light bulb on the porch. And it had to be a tall person. You had to step on that railing there to loosen it. And while the landlord was there, he was telling us about her neighbor, her next door neighbor. He was William Wessler, and that he had been arrested for molesting boys. And the landlord said, but they didn't even keep him long. He said, you know, they should have kept him longer. And he molested a boy that lived in Shirley's house. So that was the beginning of the terror that I was feeling and Shirley was feeling. Shirley told me that this man, she found out that this man was a person who raped her daughter a month before school was out that year. This was in August. And I didn't know what to do. She wouldn't go home with me. She didn't want to take her kids and go to my house. That's the first thing I wanted her to do. But she said, no, the policeman told me that it's the worst thing I could do is to leave my house. She said, well, the man enticed the two older children, my son and her oldest daughter, into his home, into his house, to show them how his dog would eat cat food. And when the little girl went in first to look for the dog, and my son saw this man, he said he picked up a knife and he was scary looking, and he went over and locked the screen door, and my son hollered at the girl to come on, let's go. And finally she saw what was happening and she ran out and passed my son and went outside. And that man, my son ran outside and the man followed him and grabbed him and tried to drag him in the house. And my son was strong enough to get away from him and ran over to Shirley's house. And Shirley told me that the man dragged their bicycles to his doorstep, hoping the kids would come back after them, I guess. In the meantime, the cops were there. And when that man saw the cops, he come over and he told the cops, I didn't push the boy, he fell. I didn't do anything to him, he fell. And the little girl who was raped was inside and she felt safe because the screen door was locked and the police were on the porch and that man was standing there. And she said, Mama, that's the man that did that thing to me. And so she told the police, I don't want that man over here. I want to talk to you. And so the police interrogated them and talked to the little girl. And it was a Friday, and they told her to go down to the police station on Monday and file a complaint. And when I got there, it was after the police had left. I'm getting so mixed up here, but I couldn't understand why they wouldn't arrest the man. Why did she have to be there alone with her kids for the weekend? Okay. I found out later that the police knew about this man. They called him Chicken Bill. And they knew, but they couldn't arrest him because they didn't have enough evidence. Anyway, I, I was scared, although I had the gun. Shirley said, well, why don't you call your sister and maybe her and her husband can come over here and be with us, because we were scared. We didn't want to go to sleep. We were scared. So my sister and her husband and their 3 children came over, and I had to listen again to the whole story about this man, about how he was terrorizing her and her kids. And through the night, she had a back porch, and my sister and brother-in-law would keep an eye on the house right across the way. They could see this man in there, and so we knew that he wasn't outside. If they left the house, then there would have been a concern to call the police. Well, it got pretty close to morning, and we didn't know, but my brother-in-law went next door, and he told that old man, "You leave those kids alone." And anything, and I don't know what happened. We didn't know. I didn't know he went over there. By then, I was my sister and Shirley and I were just scared, and I don't know where my brother-in-law and that other man went around the house. I guess he wanted to show him. The police told Shirley to put flour under the window. That way, if anybody came, there would be footprints. So they were looking at that outside, and the next thing we know is that this Westler comes in the house, staggering around, and Shirley starts screaming, and he woke up the little boy, my 3-year-old nephew, on the couch, and he started crying, and the man looked at my little nephew, and he said, "Oh my, what a cute little boy." And my sister, right away, she ran around over there to him, and she was looking up at him, and "You don't you touch my son, you stay away from my son." And all I can think of is, "Angie, be quiet. He's going to hit you. He's going to do something to you." You know, anybody who molests a child can do anything, I thought. And that's when I shot him. And I don't remember shooting the other person. I guess I hit him in the shoulder or something, and he ran down to the gas station and called the police. Shirley called the police after the shooting and told them a man broke in, my girlfriend shot him. And I was scared because I didn't know. I saw him running down the street, and I thought, he's going to get a gun. I remember seeing that. It was like I was there, and then I wasn't. I was there, and then my mind was like that. So I took the phone, and I told the dispatcher to hurry up. And I don't know, we talked. He told me to stay on the line, and they recorded that. I didn't know I was being recorded. It didn't even matter. I don't even know what I said. The police came, and at no time did I deny the shooting. On the phone, I told him, yes, I did it. I showed the police where the gun was. They arrested me, brought Shirley and my brother-in-law down to the station. And I talked to a public defender. I was booked for suspicion of murder. And my family got me out of jail after 3 days. So I thought, oh, I have the public defender, and I went to talk to them, Richard Cease and his assistant. And I told them what happened. And Richard Cease, I remember he's standing up there, and I still had a cast on my leg, and I was using one crutch. And he said, "Yvonne, you know you're guilty." And I said, I don't feel guilty. can't you help me? Can't you do something? Can't you help me? Oh, well, we'd have to build a case. And then, oh, it went on like that for a long time. I went home, I told my sister, you have to go with me because they're not going to help me. They're supposed to be my lawyers, but they're not going to help me. My sister went down there and she tried to talk to them. We both left there crying. So he scared me. He said that if I go to trial and I lose, a prosecutor probably be mad. He'll probably throw in another 5-year sentence for the use of a gun. And so finally I said, okay. Well, I went home and started writing poetry, trying to keep my mind busy. My nephew from San Diego, he was in the Navy, and he called my sister and he told her, tell Yvonne I want her to get a private attorney. I'm going to send her some money. I got $1,000. I can have my girlfriend send it to her and she get a private attorney. Let them railroad her. He said, tell her to fight it like an Indian. So I told Richard Cease I was going to get an attorney, and he said, I don't know how much time he gave me, just a day or two. He said, well, you got to hurry up and do it. I missed something. That's right. I pleaded guilty. Yeah, I pleaded guilty. So when I got the private attorney, Jean Annis, I went to court, and Judge Rowe allowed me to change the plea to not guilty to second-degree murder and first-degree assault. And I thought surely a jury would understand. You know, I didn't feel like I felt threatened. I didn't feel guilty, and I knew they would. I just knew they would understand. I was scared for everybody in that household. The kids were all sleeping. They were upstairs, except for my sister's kids. So we went to. Oh. I met this man, Floyd Westerman. My sister, before the trial, my sister said, Yvonne, there's a Indian Awareness Week at Cheney, and they invited a bunch of people, you know, speakers and everything. She said, they're going to start off with this man from South Dakota. He's going to sing some country Western songs. Let's go. And I didn't really feel like going. I was just so depressed, and I didn't feel like going anywhere. And I finally, she had my other sister talk her into going, help talk me into going. Anyway, when I told him about my case, right away he drew the parallel between a lot of different cases where Indian people were charged with murder when non-Indian people were charged with manslaughter and situations like that. And he was a member of the American Indian movement. So we fell in love. He helped me a lot. He lifted up my spirits. Went to trial with me. He saw the racism in the trial, and as well as I did. And at one point, he got up and left the courtroom. He couldn't handle it anymore. But I sat there and through the whole thing as a defendant does, you know, you can hear everything, see everything. But I still had hope, and it started on a Monday, May 7th. May 8th was the deoccupation of Wounded Knee in South Dakota. The American Indian movement, over 200 people went to Wounded Knee, and it turned into a siege, and a lot of some people were killed, and so after some people started dying, the Indian people left. So before that, there was news about Indian people based on the Wounded Knee situation, and I didn't even think of that when I went to court. But I remember my lawyer told me to tone down the Indian dress, not to, don't look Indian, in other words, and I didn't understand that. And the prosecutor said, oh, Eugene Annis told me to sit there and be objective. He said some defendants talk to their lawyers during trial, and I don't like that. I don't do that. I didn't even know what objective meant. But I sat there, quiet. I didn't say anything. And the prosecutor used that against me. He told the jury, look at her, how calm she sits there. And one time he looked at me and he said, we brought the gun here first. You have no right to take the law into your own hands. So by Friday, we were done. The first day was jury selection, and then the trial. Then Friday, we were done, and they had to come up with the jury instructions, and the judge was rushing them. I want to get this done, right away, cut and dried. I still had hopes. So Floyd and I went over to Eugene Annis's house that next day. Sunday, we were visiting in the yard, and he got a call. He said the judge wants to hear. The judge said that the jury wants to hear the tape, the police tape, and that was the first time I realized, I wonder why. But he used again the stereotype, the cool and calm and collected criminal Indian woman. I listened when I heard that tape. My voice was almost inaudible. It was so low, but although I was hysterical, I could hardly talk. And Shirley Hooper, on contrasted to that, was screaming. And so I knew then that's why he wanted the jury wanted to hear the tape again. They wanted to listen to my voice. And 45 minutes after that, they convicted me. And that was on Mother's Day, May 13th, 1973. And so I remained on bond. They knew I wasn't going to run because the Colorado Reservation was just 80 miles away. My family was there. They knew I wasn't going to run.
Yvonne, as I recall, you were.
Friday.
Oh, go ahead.
Excuse me. Go ahead. On Friday, I think it was Friday, when Eugene Annis told the judge that he was going to appeal the use of the tape, the police tape. And it was at that time, it was a Watergate scandal. And the trial judge joked. He said, well, Ehrlichman tapes all his calls. And I looked up at Annis and he looked at the judge like, I don't believe you said that. And I couldn't believe it. So I felt like a number. So
if I remember, Yvonne, go ahead. If I remember, they sentenced you to 20 years. Is that right? Were you sentenced to 20 years after you were convicted? Is that right?
I thought it was 20 for each, but I'm not sure.
I think
Something
they ran.
made me think. I added up. I thought 45 years is what I was facing. I think I was sentenced to 2 20-year terms.
Okay.
For second-degree murder and first-degree assault.
And can you talk about how after the Court of Appeals and before the Supreme Court, you managed to find William Kunstler, then a very famous lawyer, and how this thing got so big beyond just a standard, what you might call a regular Spokane case.
Okay. um, I became pregnant, so that set the appeal back a little while. In the meantime, I went to Minnesota, Minneapolis, or St. Paul for the Wounded Knee trials. Russell Means and Dennis Banks were on trial for their leadership in what they call the occupation of Wounded Knee. And that's when I saw William Kunstler. He was representing Russell Means. And I thought, to have a lawyer representing Indian people, that's awesome. And I liked the way he represented him. The judge ended up throwing it out. He said the rivers of justice have been polluted, and he just threw it out, and Russ and Dennis got to leave. So I had it in my mind that my wish list that I wanted to meet William Kunstler, and I ended up in New York. Floyd was a musician, and he had to go into New York for some music business, and so I went along with him, and I brought my paperwork. He said, "I'll take you to the Indian Center." He said, "They'll help you." So I went there, and they called the WBAI radio, and Natasha Fryer was there, and she interviewed me. And after the interview, I told her, "Oh, you know, I really would like to meet Bill Kunstler. I heard he lives in New York." And Floyd said, "I didn't know you wanted to meet him. I know him. I know Bill. I could have introduced you." I thought it was too big of a wish, you know, I would never be able to meet him. So right away, I went to his home, his office, and I had he said, your trial transcript is so small. He said, I got to read the whole thing. And he said, it's interesting. He said, but he said, I think there's some women's issues in this case. And if you don't mind, I'd like to run it by the women attorneys at the Center for Constitutional Rights. And if they don't take the case, he said, I will. And I said, oh, I was a little bit disappointed, but I went along with it. So we went, I took care of some business, and I got a call, and Kunstler said, the women are going to take the case. He said, but I'll help them. I'll be there. By then I'd had, let me see, that was in 1975. The appeal came down. Yeah, the appeal decision came down, but it was a 2-1 decision. And that gave the prosecutor the right to appeal to the highest court in the state, is the way I understand it. So the lawyers contacted Eugene Annis, and they became my appeal lawyers. And besides the tape issue, which was a major issue, they brought in the sexism. The jury instructions, they pointed out that it was sexist, that even the pronouns in the instruction referred to a male defendant. And there were other things that they pointed out. And the stereotype, you know, well, anyway, that was a major decision. The Supreme Court justices took, I don't know how long, almost a year. Yeah, almost a year. And my lawyers from New York, I had Susan Jordan and Nancy Stearns. And then in Washington State, I had Alice Tyler. And Liz Schneider said, our phones were ringing off the hook. she said, when we got the decision, we thought, oh, great, we won. But the gravity of the whole thing didn't hit them until the phone started ringing and they say, well, what about this? What about this? You know, they have clients or lawyers or wanted their help. The justice who made the statement, he said this, he referred to this country's long and unfortunate history of sex discrimination. And that was the major, that was the case is referred to as the Wanrow decision and the Wanrow instruction. And it has freed so many women now that I lost count. They get a better chance in court when their defense is self-defense. And even one of them made it all worth it. So that was 1972. And 1975. So going back to what my nephew said, fight it like an Indian. Okay. I always knew I was Indian. And I saw at age 21, I saw the injustice. I saw the wrongs, you know, in our political arena, in the tribal system, and I became involved that way. But I really didn't know deep in my heart about my culture, about my traditions. You know, I knew some of the language my mom taught me, a lot of things my mom taught me. And so that made me think, fight it like an Indian. Okay. I have to find some good people in Spokane. I don't know very many. I knew Ken Isserlis. I met him. I met a few other people, but I had to somehow roused out a bunch more people. So I had to go out and I had to get outside help, kind of surround Spokane. And I told my sisters when 1973, I said, you know, they're going to put me in jail and take my kids away from me. We got to do something. We are talented, you know, we can use our art. I got to get involved in my own defense somehow. And we came up with the idea of having fashion shows. And so we were all designers and my seamstresses. So that's what we did. I could never talk in front of a class, in front of a group or a big audience. But I got over that because my sister had me read the commentary cards. I got over my shyness that way. And so that's how the publicity started, through the fashion shows. We got coverage in Spokane, and I was invited to speak at Montana State University in Missoula. AIM people, Steve Robidoux, invited me. I was on stage talking about my case briefly. Buffy St. Marie, who is a pre-musician, singer, songwriter, artist, was coming on after me, and she was standing to the left of me there, and she was listening. And when I got done talking, I went off stage, and she said, Yvonne, she took out her checkbook and she scribbled a check and she handed it to me. She said, take this and go get a plane ticket and go to Los Angeles and meet my publicist, Karen Shearer. She'll help you. And she went on stage. So that kicked off. Floyd got me the American Indian Movement support, who got all of the Indian people in the Western Hemisphere practically as my supporters. And Buffy St. Marie got me the support of all the women through Karen Shearer, who wrote the first 5-page story and fed it to the feminist press and to everybody in Hollywood that she knew. And so I began to be invited to different cities, to different national organization for women meetings, and I got to be invited to Minneapolis, Canada, all over speaking. talk about my case, talk about my culture, talk about our philosophy as Indian people. And I was learning at the same time by going to conferences that were put together, called together by the American Indian movement. And I learned from them. So that shed the spotlight on Spokane, and I met a lot more people. I met Cece Verhoeven, became good friends with her, and she pulled the support together. By the time I went to Seattle for the appeal, or Olympia, I was feeling really strong. I met a lot of spiritual people. The main important thing, I learned about my culture. I learned about different traditions, our similarities as Native people. And I found my spirituality. I thought to myself in 1974, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to become a public figure, and I have to be a good person to represent my people, my family. So I'm going to not take alcohol anymore. I'm going to watch my conduct. So I had a dream after I prayed. I had a dream, and a voice woke me up and told me, fast for 4 days and quit drinking. And I looked at the clock, it was 4 o'clock. It was the 4th of July. And I remembered what happened the night before when I cried and cried. I had to ask the Creator to help me, and I had to humble myself, and if anybody knows, that's hard to do. So I ended up crying, and that changed my whole life. Personally, the case changed me in a positive way, and it changed the law in a positive way. So that parallel is very, very, I don't know how to describe it in English, but that's how the news went out. When I went to New York so many times, one time Gloria Steinem, she said, you can use my office for that press conference. So I did, I got to meet all kinds of people. I learned about other Native people. I can name them, women, Paula 3 Stars in Washington State. There's in South Dakota and the South, the women's movement paralleled my case with Joanne Little, who ended up being acquitted of murder for defending herself against a jailer who threatened her with an ice pick and threatened to rape her or have her do something to him. And they compared it with Inez Garcia, who killed the man who held her down while his friend raped her. She was, at first she was convicted and did some time in prison. And after I won my appeal in the Supreme Court, the Wanrow instruction was used in many court rooms after that. Susan Jordan, who was going to be my trial lawyer if I went to second trial, a good lawyer, she went back to California and represented Inez Garcia, and she was acquitted in her second trial based on the Wanrow instruction. So that was all those pluses,
Yvonne, we want to leave a little time for questions, but before you stop, I know this ended in April 1979 with a almost day-long hearing, and the judge, I looked at the transcript, said, "Justice with mercy is not justice." And you had reached an agreement with the prosecution, and you were able to go on with your life. you have a
Lori,
couple minutes? Anything you want to say about that before we see if there are any questions? Just that last hearing when
I
matter was
don't know
resolved.
what time it is.
It's a little before 8 o'clock, where people will, we
Are
have
we
until,
almost?
we have until 8:15. So you just want to, if you have a couple more minutes, we'll see if there are any questions. If not, you can we'll have some more questions. I'll have more questions for you. But anyway, that last hearing, April 1979,
Okay.
what do you remember that was significant about that?
Can you hear me good?
Yes,
Can you hear me now?
I
Okay.
can.
Okay. Yeah, when Susan Jordan came to town, she was getting ready in case we had to go to trial. And Liz Schneider came from New York, Mary Alice Tyler and another lawyer came to Spokane. And we were talking, we were discussing the case and everything. And Susan went and talked to Richard Cease, no, not Richard Cease, Donald Brockett, who was the prosecutor. And I don't know, she come back and she said, he is incensed. He didn't go to Olympia and argue the case. He sent his deputy prosecutor. But I asked Susan, what do you mean by incensed? She said, he was livid, he was angry, he was mad, he was pissed off. And so it went on like that and went on like that. And then I don't know how, I'm trying to remember how it happened, but Brockett offered a plea bargain. And my lawyers knew that I did not want to plead guilty to anything. And they said, you took a long time to plead guilty that first time. So they tried to explain it to me. And I said, we won't have the tape. I don't know. Finally, they sent for me to go to New York and they invited Floyd. And I wondered about that. He studied law, at one time. So we went to New York and they talked to Floyd and they explained the plea bargain. They must have told him to convince me because I didn't want to plead guilty. Yeah. And so he came out and he talked to me. He said, it's a good bargain. It's a good deal. He said, the prosecutor won't recommend prison. He will reduce the charges. He won't recommend jail or anything. All that's over with. He said, yeah, it's, what did he say? You should really take this deal because he said, you will have won because they will get their conviction, but they can't get you. You won't go to prison. And so I agreed. And he put me on the bus, the shuttle to go to the airport, and he come up to the window and he wrote a note, held it up to my window. And I looked out the bus window and it said, you're free. So that's how that happened.
Thank you.
So April 26, 1970, my lawyers were in town, Susan Jordan and Nancy and Liz Schneider. And for some reason, I had to go and pick them up. So I drove my car and went pick them up, and I pulled into it was parallel parking, and I hooked in there just like that. They got out, look at her. Did you see that? I wasn't scared. I was not nervous. I told them, come on. All the prayers, all the positive thoughts, all the good wishes, all the blessings, everything was with me that day. So I went in there and I appreciated everybody that spoke in my behalf, especially you, Ken. We met, you helped me, you got me national support from the Fellowship of Reconciliation. I remember the judge saying, 7 years of litigation, that was enough. He said, I know I'm going to hear some disagreements about what I'm going to say. He said, but I am going to sentence you. He said, I have to sentence you to the maximum. He said, but I'm going to drop everything but 5 years probation. And in lieu of a year in jail, a year of community service, or 2 years of community service, I think. And he told me, you can go home now. My little girl ran outside and talked to the press. This press person told me, Chante, she was only 5. She said, if my mom was going to go to prison, I was going to go with her. So it was a happy day. It was a
Yes,
happy
it
day.
was.
I did the community service. I got off probation early, thanks to Carl Maxey, my friend. He taught my dad taught Carl Maxey how to box. I want to put that in there because I saw a documentary and gave credit to a priest, but Carl told me himself, you know, your dad taught me how to box.
That made a big difference.
So he made fighting legal, huh?
There you go.
Well, yeah.
Um,
So there were some ups and downs.
yeah, there certainly were, and that was a good day. Let's see if anyone has any questions. We've got 10 or 15 minutes. If not, we can say a few more things. But if there are any questions, please just, I don't know how to call on someone in this format. So if you have a question, just unmute yourself and ask the question, please. Nick, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
Okay, say it again.
And people can raise their hand too, if any way they want. It's an amazing story, just wonderful story, just fabulously interesting. And our organization is committed to having the communities, the students and labor coming together. And it's just amazing that the kind of support that just started rallying and building for you. I just think it was wonderful. Inspirational, and sure hope we see a lot more of that kind of thing in this country. Any kind of questions, raise your hands.
It looks like Morton
Taylor,
and
go ahead.
George. It looks like Morton and George might both be unmuted. So if either of
Okay.
you were hoping to say something, go for it.
Okay, Mort or George.
Well, Yvonne, thank you so much for that incredible story and its outcome. And I perceive that you're such a strong person. Could you speak a little bit about your inner strength and where that comes from?
Thank you. I was in San Francisco, and by that time I had met Chief Leonard Crodog from Rosebud, South Dakota. He's a very, he was a medicine man, very spiritual man that I knew. And I heard that he was in Los Angeles. And I asked him, Leonard, do you think you could come through on your way home, stop at my reservation and pray for my people? Yeah, I could do that. Okay, all right. So when I got home, I called him and to make sure, and I said, what would you need? And he said, well, I would need $500 and some peyote. Oh, okay. Well, I'll have to get back to you. I did not know what peyote was. I knew it was a medicine, an herb, and I didn't have any clue where to get it. I didn't have any money. A knock on the door, and there was a friend of mine from Nespelem, and I was just thinking of him. He would know, and he knocked on my door. I said, come in, I gotta go sit down. He said, why? I said, I just need to talk to you. And he said, what's up? And I said, well, I need $500. I can get Leonard Crodog to come here and have a Native American church ceremony. If you can help me, he needs money in peyote. And he said, well, I can get it. So that's how Leonard Crodog came here to Inchlam and had the first meeting in October 1977. And set up a teepee, and word got around, Crodog's in Inchlam. 75 people came for that meeting, all night meeting in a teepee, ceremony, prayer ceremony. And at midnight, Crodog said, at midnight, sister, he said, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to blow this eagle bone whistle to the grandfathers of the 4 directions. When I go out that door, you follow me and you go up there on that hill there and you talk to Tunkashila, Tunkashila Lakota for grandfather, great spirit, Tunkashila Wakantanka. And you ask him what you want and it'll be that way for you, okay? I said, okay. By then I had not known anything about praying. I was raised Catholic, but I set that aside for a while. And time came and I went up and I didn't know what to say. I looked up to the stars. I knew the river was below. I could hear the eagle bone whistle and I knew I had to hurry. So I said, I don't want to go to prison. I don't want to go to trial again. And that's all I could think of. And I saw Crodog at the door, so I went down and we had the ceremony. And there was another ceremony where Crodog was there and he talked to the spirits and they told him, she will be there will be 2 stops and she'll be free. So that was 77 and 2 years later, 79. That's how I really became strong. I mean, I was getting strong all along by the prayers and everything, but that's really when I understood my connection to the Creator, the belief in the Creator. The Creator is all things. It's the universal. As Crodog said, there's a universal university. We don't have to go into a little church to pray to Tunkashla, can stand on the mountainside, a hill, and talk to Creator. You humble yourself before the Creator, and that's when it happens. The Creator talks to you. The Creator sends you messages through children, which happened to me a lot. My babies would talk like grown-ups, but I knew it was the spirits talking to me. And the animals would come into my dreams and tell me what was going to happen. I saw one on the Brooklyn Bridge, but at the time I didn't, a bear, I didn't know that was until I got on that Brooklyn Bridge and I realized the bear was telling me in a dream that I was going to go to New York. And so we believe that we're related to all things. We have a relationship to all of creation, and we have a assignment to take care of Mother Earth. Those were the original instructions that I didn't know when I was a young girl, but now I know. Yeah. So right now, Mother Earth is getting ready. She's purifying herself. You'll see the changes in the weather, and there's going to be a time, and I don't know when, but sometime there's going to be a day of purification. And I had dreams of the changes of the natural weather, winds, all that came true now. So we have to pray for Mother Earth too.
Thank you. We've got about 5 minutes. Morton, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for your story, telling us your story. Do you notice any difference between now and those times as to how Native Americans do in the court system?
I'm sorry, can you talk louder? I didn't hear you.
Do you notice any difference between then and now as to how Native American defendants do in the court system?
Sure. The question was between the time of your trial and now, have you seen any difference in the way Native Americans are treated in the courts in this country?
Yes, especially on the Supreme Court level. When I went there, they were all elder. More
You're fro-
open. The women, well, Paul Skyhorse and Richard Mohawk were set up by the FBI and charged with murder. And they spent a long time in prison before they even went to trial. And my friend Cece Glenn's brother was in Los Angeles and he represented Paul Skyhorse. And they were both acquitted. It took a lot of work, you know. But now, I don't really, you know, to answer your question, I'm not really sure. I did a lot of prison work, and like in Montana, there's a lot of prisoners. I
If you
really don't know.
if you didn't know, Yvonne, the Washington Supreme Court, where your case ended up, of the 9 members, 7 of them are now women, including only the second Native American woman to ever be on a state Supreme Court anywhere in the country. So that has certainly changed since in the last 50 years. We're about out of
That's
time.
true.
Yeah, we're about out of time. Hard to believe, but next August, Yvonne, it'll be 50 years since August of 1972. And you've been an inspiration, obviously, to me, but to thousands of others that whole time. So thank you for everything. Nick, it appears we're out of time. Is there anything else we need to do?
No, that's about it. That was really amazing. Thank you very much. That was it's kind of hard to clap and applaud in this situation, but I feel like I'm cheering and clapping. So that was a wonderful presentation, inspirational, and I think we're gonna have to invite you back soon. And you're a member of our group now, so we'll email you all the time. That's just the only membership. You just keep getting emails from us.
That's okay.
So, thank you very much, Yvonne. Is there anything else? Taylor, I want to thank you. I don't know if anyone else is. We are going to try and end it at 8:15. So, Ken, you were really helpful. I didn't get to explore any of the question. A couple questions from you at some point about the early days of Pete when PJALS was starting. Sometime we'll invite you back to talk about that too.
Good.
But I think we should try to applaud. I don't know. I'm going to clap, so I'm going to do it. So
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Yvonne,
thank
it's
you.
always good to see you, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Yvonne.
thank you.
Yes, thank you for everything. Must not be.
Very
Thank
good.
you for
Bye-bye.
sharing your story. It was so wonderful to hear it was a terrible story, but it's so wonderful to hear your point of view. So thank you.